one of the strangest things in the history of my television career is going down.
It was the flying saucer seen round the world. A silver helium-filled balloon racing across the Colorado sky with a reported stowaway on board.
Somehow the 6-year-old ends up going through the door in the thing, and he's in there.
And all of this was unfolding on live television. Is it going to crash, and is the boy going to die?
As millions of viewers held their breath, hoping for a safe landing, the story went viral. When the balloon came down, the mystery only deepened. There was no boy on board.
Rescuers got to that balloon and found it empty.
Ground crew around him right now.
The media spotlight and police scrutiny intensified.
I want your questions in the box. I'll get right back to you, okay?
The whole world wanted to know the answer.
Was it a hoax, or was it really true?
But when the truth came out, it would only make the family and their balloon boy notorious. The hunt for fame can be all-consuming. To achieve it, some have taken plastic surgery to an extreme. Others have spent a small fortune promoting themselves. Others have taken crazy, dangerous risks. But those who pull out all the stops and take their fame-seeking to the next level, they are the ones who become notorious. Thursday, October 15th, 2009, started out as a beautiful autumn day in Denver, Colorado. With a light breeze, clear skies, and temperatures in the upper 50s. But just after noon, news broke of an incredible story that seemed out of this world. One family's plaything, a helium-filled flying saucer, had accidentally taken off with an apparent passenger aboard.
I'm not entirely convinced that this is going toward Denver. It is now only 900 feet above the ground.
Anybody who had turned on a TV couldn't but be gripped by this very primal, basic, id-like idea that a little child is in that balloon, nature's breezes it blowing it away, and who knows what's going to happen.
Giving chase to the balloon was a television news helicopter.
The balloon was 20 feet long and 5 feet tall.
It looked like one of those Mylar balloons that you buy at the grocery store turned on its side.
But the real news was that a 6-year-old boy might be on board, his life hanging in the balance.
His name was Falcon. The idea that a kid is presumably being taken away by something that looks like a UFO. It's like that story was just too much.
And this was just like a silly, crazy thing that happened, and people, they got their attention. A little boy up in a balloon, oh my God.
Falcon was the son of Richard Heene and his wife, Mayumi. The Heenes, who had 2 other boys, Bradford and Rio, lived an hour north of Denver. Richard had ambitions of a career in entertainment, but when those dreams stalled, he reinvented himself on YouTube as a zany amateur scientist.
Richard Heene, science detective. Richard Heene, science detective. Richard Heene.
Richard was a man who greatly admired and idolized scientists. Many of his experiments were attempts to emulate the success of these people he admired.
One of Richard's experiments included building what he called a 3D low-altitude vehicle.
This balloon was originally meant as a prototype for alternative forms of transportation. If this were successful, it could hover 50 to 100 feet above traffic.
But on October 15th, 2009, Richard's experiment would go disastrously wrong.
Whoa!
Oh my God. Okay. Are you in? Taylor! You didn't put the Taylor down! Fireman!
Richard first appeared upset that his prize balloon became unmoored and was sailing away into the atmosphere. But he quickly realized he had much bigger problems on his hands.
Bradford kept yelling, that Falcon is in the flying saucer. And I thought, he's not, because I just saw him. He was right there. So I went in the house thinking he's in there. I ran around the yard, and there was no Falcon. Now I'm thinking, oh, what if he's in there? What am I going to do? So then I started panicking, and I had a million thoughts going at one time.
One of those thoughts was to call the Federal Aviation Administration. who immediately advised Richard to call 911. But minutes later, he instead called the news media, asking for a helicopter to track the balloon that had their son inside. Almost 10 more minutes passed before Richard's wife Mayumi finally called 911.
In my 31 years in law enforcement, I've never worked a case where the media were called right about the same time the police or law enforcement was called.
In the course of an hour, as news choppers gave chase, the balloon drifted 21 miles southeast and was spotted at an altitude of about 8,000 feet near the small town of Milliken. If Falcon was in the balloon, he was in imminent danger.
It's not that it was ever going to get so high that he was going to freeze or become unconscious due to lack of oxygen. The real danger here was trauma, either from him falling out of the balloon or the balloon crash landing.
As the story unfolded on live TV, the rescue effort picked up steam. Deputies from 2 counties tracked the balloon from the ground, while the National Guard launched 2 helicopters from nearby Buckley Air Force Base to aid in any potential rescue attempt. At 12:42 p.m., CNN broke into coverage of a town hall with President Obama to go live with the balloon chase.
And everyone, of course, is, not getting their work done, staring at the television set, watching this, because how much better does drama get than this? Is there a little boy in this thing flying through the sky?
This was, in some ways, the perfect story for the 24-hour watch it as it happens news cycle. There was a kid stuck in a giant Mylar balloon. Where was the balloon going? Was he gonna be okay? It was a case of, okay, let's keep the cameras rolling for as long as it takes. It was a real-life cliffhanger. Anybody with a child was going to be hooked.
This turns this kind of event into something of a media frenzy.
And all of this was unfolding on live television. Is it going to crash, and is the boy going to die?
And we're all watching what is the strangest thing ever. A little boy flying along at some 25 miles an hour with the word that the thing could stay up there for hours or days.
It sure looks like he's getting low there.
This could be an optical illusion, but I mean, you see those power lines down there. It just makes your stomach turn.
Rescuers worried that Falcon, if he was on board, could fall out.
We may have to begin a huge ground search to find a potentially injured, possibly lethally injured child.
Finally, approximately 2 hours after the silver balloon went up, it came down 12 miles northeast of Denver's airport.
And look at this. Would you look at this? Oh my goodness. And now the balloon is on the ground. The man has grabbed the guy wire. And is there a 6-year-old boy about to come out of this thing?
It sets down nice and smoothly, and everybody runs toward it.
Rescuers got to that balloon and found it empty.
With Falcon still missing and his safety in question, the rescue mission took on new urgency.
If you've been watching this drama, assuming there was a kid in there flying through the air, when there's not, you immediately think the child has fallen out. That's when this thing took a really kind of sad turn.
At the Heene home, a detective relayed the news to Richard and Mayumi.
He said to me that Falcon may have fallen out. Oh man, I don't even talk about the images.
There were pictures, and people were reporting that, well, we did see at one point something come out of the balloon. And there was a photograph of a little dot below the balloon, which of course you immediately assume could be the child.
Police searched the Heene home 3 times but found no sign of Falcon.
So then everybody goes looking for the kid between the 50 miles that it had happened. I mean, this is high drama of the most basic level.
Fire and police departments began frantically searching the farm fields and subdivisions in the path of the balloon. Search and rescue workers were called out to do grid searches. Even the public pitched in to help. At home, the Heene family appeared to anxiously wait for any word about Falcon.
It was tough for me to be calm. I was in my office. I'd go out there and wait on the couch, and I felt helpless. Then I got up, and I said to one of the cops, I said, I'm getting in my truck. I'm going. I got to go find him. And they told me to sit back down. And, I just felt helpless. I was out of my mind.
Falcon could be injured, but everyone needed to remain calm and stay focused on finding him so that if he were still alive, he could be given the type of medical services that he desperately would have needed.
By 4 p.m., 5 hours after the balloon first got loose, and more than an hour after the massive search effort began, hopes had faded that Falcon would be found alive.
I don't know how long we waited. It was just hours. It seemed like days.
Larimer County Sheriff Jim Alderden told reporters that a search effort was now considered a recovery effort.
After the balloon landed and it was determined the boy was not in there and determined that he was not in the house, we went into a body recovery mode.
But as the sheriff spoke to a live television audience, there was a stunning turn of events back at the Heene home. A wild plot twist that would soon make the entire family notorious.
Looks like a mushroom just floating there.
On Thursday, October 15th, 2009, television audiences around the world were transfixed by a breaking news story of a helium-filled flying saucer that had become accidentally untethered, carrying a stowaway passenger, a 6-year-old boy named Falcon Heene. The story had become the #1 searched topic on Google and dominated TV news coverage around the country. But when it was revealed that Falcon was not on board the balloon, the story appeared to take a dark turn. Larimer County Sheriff Jim Alderden relayed to reporters the grim news that they were now searching for Falcon's body.
We went into a body recovery mode.
But little did anyone know that this already fantastic story was about to take a major unexpected twist, a twist that would make the Heene family notorious. As the world was coming to grips with the news that Falcon had probably fallen out of the balloon, there was a shocking revelation at the Heene home. The 6-year-old was alive.
He's been located, he's alive, he's at the house.
Richard Heene recalled the moment he found out his son was still alive.
Mayumi screamed. We were sitting on the sofa, and she screamed because she saw Falcon. Falcon came and greeted us at the couch. And then once I saw he was okay, it's just a giant sense of relief. The weight was taken on my shoulders.
As it turned out, Falcon had been hiding in the attic the entire time, apparently upset that his father had yelled at him earlier in the day.
There's the good kind of shocks, and there's the bad kind of shocks. Fortunately, when Falcon was finally found, that was a good kind of shock.
The day had been so crazy, and everyone was grateful that there was a happy ending.
Minutes after Falcon was discovered, the Heene family stepped outside to meet with reporters. Appearing emotionally drained, Richard recounted the roller coaster day.
I'm really sorry I yelled at him.
But for some members of the press, the Heene story didn't add up. They wanted answers as to how Richard lost track of his son and how Falcon hid for hours right underneath everyone's noses.
After going through that stress, now I got a whole new wave of stress hitting me really hard. And I got Falcon with me, and I'm answering questions, and I can't even remember what the questions were, but so I'm answering the questions. Everybody that would answer a question, I'm thinking, I hope this is the last one. I'm going to go back inside.
Richard sought sanctuary inside his home, but there was no escape from the skeptical media.
Once the relief of finding Falcon had started to dissipate, the next natural question that people had was, if he wasn't in the balloon, where was he during this whole ordeal?
Later that day, with his father at his side, Falcon told reporters why he hid in the attic.
He scared me because he yelled at me. That's why I went in the attic.
As proof of their story, the family released a home video that Mayumi shot that day that supposedly showed the incident that caused Falcon to hide in the attic.
Okay, get up.
Falcon, come here now. I just never knew that the kids knew of a way to get into the attic. They never told me, they never showed me, so I had no idea that you could even get in the attic from that point.
At a press conference, Larimer County Sheriff Jim Alderden told reporters that it's not unusual for young children to hide if they think they're in trouble.
It seems much more likely that the boy was in fact frightened because he somehow thought that he was responsible for this device becoming untethered and therefore decided to hide.
But reporters were now questioning the cost to taxpayers for the fruitless rescue operation, which included 2 helicopters, one of which was a Black Hawk that cost nearly $5,000 an hour.
To put it simply, Rescue operations cost money. Interestingly enough, a great deal of that cost is actually borne by the volunteers themselves, people who are driving their own vehicle, for example, or using other expendables during the course of the search. So it's difficult in many cases to estimate how much something like this actually costs, but I would speculate that it would be many, many thousands of dollars by the end of it.
While reporters were attempting to tally up the cost, later in the evening, the incredible story of Balloon Boy took yet another dramatic twist.
The moment I think this really begins to become a different kind of story, not about the triumph of a child who we thought was in danger and really wasn't in danger, but something completely different, was probably that CNN appearance and interview.
Few could have predicted that Falcon was about to blurt out a secret that would stun millions and change the image of the Heene family from sympathetic victims to notorious schemers.
Why didn't you come out?
You guys said that we did this for the show.
Falcon's admission appeared to catch his father off guard.
You didn't come out?
No.
If you'd have cocked your ear to the sky, there would have been a collective gasp of the television viewers across the nation. And that's when I think certainly media operations decided that something fishy was going on. I think an awful lot of other people did as well.
TV viewers, as well as law enforcement, began wondering if the whole thing had been an elaborate hoax all along. Following the media interview, Richard and his family headed home to seek refuge. But when they arrived at their house, dozens of reporters were waiting.
Once doubt was cast around one family member, especially one who commanded attention, doubt spread to the rest of the family.
The Heenes walked the media gauntlet and refused to answer questions. Instead, they posted a note on their front door saying, "We are not taking any interviews anymore. We are tired." Richard sought a temporary escape from the scrutiny of the media and the increasingly skeptical public.
There was a lot of negative comments. There was a lot of negative press going on. And then I thought, how can they turn that around? How can they do a spin doctor on us?
But the media only grew more aggressive in its questioning of the story.
Because people don't want to be duped. And that was basically the problem with this case. Was it a hoax or was it really true?
It became clear that something was amiss here. This was something that shouldn't have happened, and it took away so much from the resources of multiple jurisdictions of law enforcement agencies that someone had to pay the price here, not only out of their wallet, but perhaps with jail time too.
After 6-year-old Falcon, the balloon boy, made a revealing admission on national television.
Why didn't you come out?
You guys said that we did this for the show.
The Heene family appeared to be exposed as notorious con artists on Friday, October 16th, 2009. The day after the disastrous TV interview, Richard Heene took to the airwaves again to try to contain the damage.
Richard, I want to give you a chance to help clarify some of the questions surrounding Falcon and this balloon and the disappearance of your little boy last night.
First of all, let's clarify, he's 6, and I don't know that he really understood, the question he was being answered.
Under the glare of the bright studio lights, the pressure appeared to get to Richard's son, Falcon.
Falcon then says he's sick and then goes off and actually pukes on live television.
One of the guys told me it was for some TV show, so that's what he was referring to.
Richard Heene later gave numerous interviews, trying to explain what his son meant when he said, "They did it for the show."
So after, we'll say the stuff hit the fan, I asked Falcon why he phrased it that way. And Falcon told me that the reporter out front asked him to show him how he got into the attic for his show. He said, "What did that mean?" And I said, "Well, it's for his TV show." So later on, his answer on camera was relating to that incident.
Richard's explanation doesn't convince skeptical reporters. They begin digging into the Heene's background and the events leading up to the balloon flight. What they found was a man who had long been desperate for stardom. Richard Heene first sought fame in the early 1990s as a storm chaser in California's Central Valley. When that didn't pan out, he moved to Los Angeles in 1991 to pursue a career as a stand-up comedian.
I got a pretty good spanking because I thought you could just kind of book yourself in a club, do open mic nights, and so I found out that you had to pay for the rooms.
With stand-up comedy too expensive a proposition, Richard quickly moved on to acting.
He was a low-level actor, putting himself through various acting schools.
Acting wasn't going any better, but in 1997, Richard met Mayumi Iizuka in one of his classes. Mayumi had recently immigrated from her native Japan, where she played in a rock band. The couple quickly fell in love.
I told her that I'd like to get married, start a business, have some kids. And it literally happened in that order, so that was good.
3 months after meeting, Richard and Mayumi married and started a family. Their first son, Bradford, was born in 1999. A year later, Mayumi gave birth to the couple's second son, a boy they named Rio. In 2002, on New Year's Eve, son Falcon was born. The young parents' initial foray into the entertainment business did not take off.
The two of them hoped to make it big in Hollywood, but all of their attempts were really a flop.
With his career in show business at a standstill, Richard, who was also a trained carpenter, reinvented himself as a man of science.
New inventions really intrigue me. I love new inventions. That makes me happy. So whatever I have in my life, if I don't have it, I try to invent it, so I got it to help me along with whatever I have to do.
He also rediscovered his passion for storm chasing.
It was clear that Richard Heene had no intentions of living what we would call an average life. He wanted to do something big.
In 2007, Richard moved his family east to Fort Collins, Colorado.
And we moved there specifically to chase tornadoes. A friend of ours who chased with us said you can make money chasing tornadoes and by selling the footage. So we would sell the footage to whoever would want to buy it.
Merging his interest in science and show business, in 2007, Richard began co-hosting a web series called Science Detectives. The campy show caught the attention of producers of the reality TV show Wife Swap.
I said, I don't want to do that. But then I got on the phone with the people at Wife Swap, and they said to me that there's an educational message at the end. And they said the other part is it pays extremely well. And I thought I could take that money and put it in my research. So that's how Wife Swap came about.
On Wife Swap, the Heenes quickly became fan favorites.
Well, they were a loud family and were certainly memorable.
Richard's flair for the dramatic generated buzz.
Richard caused controversy on the show when he yelled at his swapped wife.
Okay, you're supposed to live the life of Mayumi. Mayumi doesn't jackhammer me. She doesn't go, I really don't want to hear that.
According to Richard, it was all an act.
It's a weird thing because the things you wouldn't normally do, how you treat people, you got to amp it up for the show.
I'm listening to you nagging, you're moaning, you're groaning all day long, and I don't want to hear it.
Through his multiple appearances on Wife Swap, Richard finally got a taste of the fame he'd hungered for. He liked the attention and wanted more.
These intense interactions made him a small celebrity within the Wife Swap audience.
With opportunities afforded by his Wife Swap celebrity, Richard was able to continue funding his invention. He decided to build an idea he first came up with in Los Angeles, a giant balloon he called a 3D LAV.
The purpose of my 3D LAV, low altitude vehicle, was so that people could come out of the garage, okay, rise up, go to work, do whatever they got to do in a lesser amount of time, avoid crashes, save lives. They kept calling it a balloon, and it wasn't a balloon.
In early October 2009, Richard put his plan into motion.
Okay, guys, load up.
During the next 2 weeks, Richard and his kids assembled the LAV with Mayumi documenting it all on video.
Look here. You blow up like this. Look at that. See, look up here. Cross here. So this connects to this, and I gotta connect those.
Oh, I get it, okay.
Hey, here's a craft that won't make any noise, doesn't use kinetic energy. It uses just electricity to go left, right, backward, forward.
Although Richard was a carpenter by trade, he had no formal training as a scientist or balloon maker, all of which made the safety of his experiment an open question.
If you ask me from my emergency services perspective, what to do to make this experiment more controlled, I would say not do it.
On Thursday, October 15th, 2009, test day had arrived. Richard filled his silver saucer-shaped balloon with helium. Fascinated by the floating object, 6-year-old Falcon climbed inside.
Falcon, Falcon, you can't be inside. Get out.
Pokey,
I'm talking to you. You better not. I hope you're kidding about that.
come on so I can see ya. Falcon, now! You are inside. Come on, get out.
Finally, after getting Falcon out of the balloon, the big moment arrived.
Record. 3, 2, 1. So we pulled the release pin.
Whoa!
Oh my God.
Although Richard planned every detail of the experiment, he acted surprised when the balloon broke free. As the balloon rose into the atmosphere, Richard claims that his 10-year-old son Bradford told him that Falcon could be inside.
And I'm thinking, no, no, no. And then it's gone. There goes the whole project. I was pretty spastic about that, you know, watching it go. And so I kind of lost my mind at that moment.
Moments later, the family appears to notice Falcon is missing. Or maybe it didn't happen that way at all. Could Richard have enlisted his young son in a plot to deceive a worldwide audience?
Is it possible that young Falcon walked upstairs into the attic above the garage and fell asleep? Of course it's possible. However, is it probable?
And there was a definite possibility that Richard could have been desperate enough to become famous that he lied about his son's life being in danger.
As the investigation heated up, Richard's showbiz ambitions crumbled. The question now was whether he was about to trade in his top hat for an orange jumpsuit. Richard Heene had spent most of his adult life seeking fame. And now that insatiable hunger for celebrity was making him notorious.
I want the answer, sir. Friend.
On October 15th, 2009, Richard and his 3 boys were running tests on a balloon-like craft he had invented when it became untethered.
Are you tethered?
Then, a terrible revelation. Their 6-year-old son Falcon was missing. Within hours, the story of Balloon Boy gripped the nation.
There's no child in this balloon.
Later, it was discovered that Falcon had been hiding in the attic, and when the boy later blurted out on live TV that they did it for the show, law enforcement officials immediately decided to conduct an investigation.
Every now and again, you get a story like this where stuff comes together in such thick layers, battalions of details, that it's hard to believe it's true.
People weren't sure if they could trust the Heene's account of what actually happened. Certainly, the first responders and the police and everybody else don't want to be made a fool of.
Law enforcement was investigating this potential hoax from a criminal investigation for all the expenditures and times and essentially the false report that was filed.
The cost of the massive rescue effort was expected to be tens of thousands of dollars. If the Heenes staged a hoax, they could be slapped with the bill, as well as possible jail time. But even as public suspicion rose, Richard Heene stuck to his story.
Was this some sort of publicity stunt? Was this a hoax? And will you talk to the police today?
Absolutely no hoax. I want your questions in the box. I'll get right back to you, okay? I tell people, I'm just Richard. I do what Richard does. People do say I'm eccentric. People say that these things, but I'm a man of sound mind. I know exactly what I'm doing.
Authorities agreed, and they now believed Richard's original intention was to manipulate the media in order to pursue his dreams of fame.
When he had gotten a taste of cameras on him and all the rest of it, that can be pretty heady stuff. Many said that the whole Balloon Boy hoax was just because he wanted to get a reality TV show.
That suspicion was corroborated by Richard's former assistant, Robert Thomas, who revealed on a TV news broadcast that the father of 3 had unsuccessfully pitched reality show concepts to cable network executives.
It was really about, hey, you know, if we did this right, it'd be on every major news network around the world.
Then, another detail leaked out.
When he went to buy helium, he apparently mentioned to the salesperson that it was for a spaceship that he was building for a reality TV show.
Bit by bit, The would-be entertainer's outlandish, cynical plan for instant fame was being uncovered. Instead of TV celebrities, Richard Heene and his family were being exposed as notorious frauds.
It seems that some sort of notoriety down the line, even if temporary, was the goal of this hoax. And if that's the case, Richard Heene got exactly what he wanted.
As investigators looked at the family's public statements, something didn't seem quite right.
Richard Heene was an actor. Some of his answers in the media seemed rehearsed or practiced, like someone who had actually written lines down in advance.
The family's eagerness to be on TV also raised questions.
The way the family was answering certain questions, their demeanor, their persona when in front of the cameras, and their insistence on being in front of these same cameras, it became clear that something was amiss here.
As the smell of scandal surrounded the investigation, authorities re-examined the Heenes' immediate actions after Falcon was discovered missing. What first seemed odd now seemed calculated.
In a situation like this, every minute is critical, or certainly can be critical. The first thing the family should have done was call 911.
But Richard claimed that with an airborne balloon, calling 911 didn't make any sense.
I said, what are they going to do? What are the cops going to do? What's a fire truck going to do?
But even after they called the FAA, the Heenes still didn't think it was necessary to call 911. Instead, they called a local TV station.
Then I told Miami to find a helicopter. She called the news because they have helicopters. So I guess in her mind, she knew that traffic reports or whatever had helicopters.
Finally, nearly 20 minutes after the balloon had taken flight, Richard Heene called 911.
We can't find it. The 6-year-old Falcon, he said he was in there. I tried to find him anywhere. Okay.
Richard soon took over the conversation and breathlessly told the operator that his son was in danger.
No, he doesn't know how it operates. We had it tethered. It wasn't supposed to take off, and it operates off of 1,000,000 volts.
On Saturday, October 17th, 2009, 2 days after the incident, and after the disastrous CNN interview, the Heenes agreed to meet with the investigators.
But the first call was to the FAA?
Yes.
And my understanding is they tell you to call 911?
Yeah, and I found it to be shocking because I would have called. I actually thought to call 911. I'm like, you know, they don't have any way to fly it to, so that's why I thought of the FAA.
In his interview, Richard adamantly denied staging a hoax in order to get a reality TV show. But Sheriff Alderton amped up the pressure, asking Richard if he was willing to be interviewed by a polygraph specialist, even though some experts say the results are accurate only 70% of the time.
He wanted me to take the lie detector test just to clear things up. And I'm thinking, this is really crazy right now, and I shouldn't be here.
We'll take a break and walk around a little bit, kind of wake up a little bit, use the restroom. Yeah. Because I can see you're struggling a little bit, but we'll take a break and then we're going to redo the questions again.
Okay. I got some circulation, okay? I am just not here. Okay.
Richard took a polygraph, during which he is believed to have faked low blood sugar in an effort to avoid answering questions. But when his wife Mayumi took a polygraph, her results were more conclusive. They indicated she was hiding something.
You understand what I mean by hoax? Okay.
I'm worried about my kids.
You're worried about the kids?
Law enforcement investigators are familiar with people who stage crimes, so this case was no different in that regard.
Investigators confronted Mayumi with the polygraph findings and their other suspicions. In broken English, Mayumi admitted the balloon was never intended to be just a science experiment, which police interpreted as an admission that the whole incident was staged.
Did you guys build this for the purpose of this hoax? Is that the whole purpose of building it?
Honestly, this experiment itself is not only for this.
Mayumi later signed an affidavit which stated the incident was all a hoax, concocted by Richard.
He had a desire to work in the reality TV realm. I think a lot of people say that this was a publicity stunt to get him a reality TV show.
He knew that in general, the public usually unite around a crisis, and particularly when children are involved.
Despite Falcon's damning television admission and Mayumi's confession, Richard refused to admit that he had concocted an elaborate hoax. Instead, he disputed the validity of his wife's confession.
I'm not holding anything against her, but she's not a U.S. citizen. She doesn't know the language. And when When I went back to review her interrogation, I knew she was being trapped.
In spite of Richard's denials, on Sunday, October 18th, 2009, Larimer County Sheriff Jim Alderton announced to the media that he believed that the balloon boy incident had been staged.
It has been determined that this is a hoax.
The sheriff said his office would recommend charges against the Heenes, including contributing to the delinquency of minors, attempting to influence a public servant, and conspiracy. The charges carried a penalty of up to 12 years in prison and $500,000 in fines for wasting public resources in the rescue effort.
It's difficult to underestimate the severity of the waste of resources. The Heenes would have to repay the cost of the emergency rescue mission if they were found guilty of fraud.
To the end, Richard Heene remained defiant, blaming the sheriff for his troubles.
This whole thing could have been halted and stopped if that sheriff didn't come out and lie to the press and say, before any charges were even filed, he came out and said the whole thing was a hoax.
Despite Mayumi's confession, Richard Heene prepared to do battle in court.
I gotta have my name cleared.
But perhaps their biggest battle would be in the court of public opinion.
Just as the balloon went up and then eventually came down, so did the public's likability factor of Richard Heene.
At one point, we're just living our lives being us, and now we're public enemy number one.
In the fall of 2009, Richard and Mayumi Heene went from being viewed as innocent victims to notorious scammers, all within a matter of days. After the saga of the balloon boy evolved into the balloon boy hoax.
As I said, it has been determined that this is a hoax.
During questioning with police, some of Mayumi Heene's responses were interpreted as an admission that the whole incident was staged.
Honestly, this experiment itself is not only for this.
Richard would later say the so-called confession was the result of coercion and his wife's poor understanding of English.
Because the line of questioning, then when you look at what was on the affidavit and you compare it to what was in the video, he would lie and say, she said this statement. She never said that statement. He was putting words in her mouth like it was fact.
Richard maintained his defiance, but eventually the seriousness of the charges against him and his wife made him rethink his options. Shortly before trial, Richard and Mayumi entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. But Richard says he only made the deal because the DA railroaded them into the plea agreement by threatening Mayumi.
They cornered me with the idea that my wife is going to be deported and I'd lose my children if I didn't take the fall for this.
On November 13th, 2009, Richard and Mayumi went to court and entered guilty pleas.
A plea being voluntary, not coerced, your decision.
Nothing.
Okay, it is voluntary, it is not coerced, it is your decision to do so.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Richard admitted to knowingly and falsely influencing a public servant, the sheriff, which is a felony, while Mayumi pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor charge of filing a false report. The Heenes were also ordered to pay $36,000 in restitution to cover the costs of the massive emergency response.
One thing I think is important to mention here is that while there's a financial cost to individuals involved in these kinds of rescues as well as government entities, there's also a human cost. Financial costs are often dwarfed by the emotional costs on the rescuers themselves. People who are involved in these kinds of rescues often wind up having a difficult time dealing with things even when they're successful.
The next month, at sentencing, Richard appeared contrite as he quietly apologized to the rescue workers involved in the incident.
And I want to apologize to all the rescue workers out there and the people that got involved in the community.
Richard was sentenced to 90 days of jail time. Mayumi was sentenced to 20 days of weekend jail.
Ironically, Richard's trip to jail garnered the type of attention some say he was seeking with his balloon boy hoax.
That morning when I went to have Mayumi drop me off, we literally had a police escort. We had a helicopter follow us. The police helicopter followed us to the jail There were undercover SUVs and cops following me to the jail. I mean, come on, you would have thought I'd murdered 1 million people.
After Richard got out of jail in 2010, the family moved to Florida, where Richard works in construction.
It's ultimately a case of reaching too far for celebrity. In an age of reality TV and absurdities on TV, staging something like this proved to be a step over the line.
Richard and Mayumi Heene never got a reality TV show. Although he dropped his wacky experiments, Richard never completely stopped seeking fame and fortune. Today, he markets various inventions, such as a unique back scratcher, and he manages his 3 sons' metal rock band.
The Heene Boys features now 15-year-old Falcon as the lead vocalist, and their 3rd album includes a song called Balloon Boy No Hoax.
Richard sold his big silver balloon at auction. The asking price? $1 million. He got $2,500. As part of their plea agreement, the Heenes didn't profit from the Balloon Boy saga. According to Richard, they donated the money to charity. Despite his guilty plea and Mayumi's confession, Richard has continued to deny he perpetrated a hoax. He wants to clear his name.
Either he's trying to convince us that it's not a hoax because it wasn't a hoax, or he's trying to convince us that it's not a hoax so that the one story that he became hugely famous for tilts more in his favor.
The infamous Balloon Boy incident had consequences not only for Richard Heene and his family, but for the larger culture.
I think Balloon Boy is a really important example of the evolution of how television news evolved in the age of cable television. And, we've got O.J. Simpson, of course. That's a big example of that. But Balloon Boy is this pure, unadulteratedly fake story.
The Heene case was basically a diversion from actual news of murders and accidents and police involvement and fires and so on as to something that just seemed completely bizarre. And so it really captured the imagination of people that were interested in this sort of thing.
The saga of Balloon Boy captivated a global audience, but ultimately the story, built on lies, deception, and exploitation, didn't hold air. The Heenes learned the hard way that even the best-laid plans sometimes crash and burn. It was a cold dose of reality, a life lesson that made them notorious.